What are the signs that you might be non-binary? Let's hear from Lynn and find out.
So the first sign that you might be non-binary is that you aren't comfortable with he, him, or she, her pronouns. I've never had that real connection with womanhood, and being called she, her was always kind of an apathetic experience for me. I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with he, him pronouns. I guess she, her pronouns are the best that's ever gonna get. That's what I dealt with for the first 18, 19 years of my life. And then when I found out that they, them was an option, at first I was like, oh, that's weird because, you know, internalized envy phobia.
Some women don't relate to ultra femininity, but it doesn't make them any less of a woman. On the other hand, trans men, they have a neurological reason not connecting to womanhood, and they have to live life as the opposite sex in order to be happy. So when I look at non-binary females like her, I wonder how they're uncomfortable with being women because they don't transition at all.
Yeah, I did use all pronouns at one point, and there are certain situations and days and dysphoria levels where I am comfortable being called he, him, or she, her, but for the most part, they, them is just my standard because it's what I'm most comfortable with.
Dysphoria levels? Dysphoria levels apparently determines what pronouns you're most comfortable with, and it changes by the day? I'm sorry, my friend, that's not how dysphoria works. It's not dysphoria, it's probably something else.
The second sign is that you overanalyze your body to all hell. Now, I know this is not something that is specifically just for non-binary people. I know that there are people with body dysmorphia that do this as well. So I would also look into that if you have those kind of issues. But for me, I know that when I was younger and looking in the mirror, I could not see myself. As soon as I started going through puberty and getting a chest and getting hips and looking just more feminine in my body, I would spend hours a day looking in the mirror, trying to figure out what was wrong and trying to fix how my body looked and trying to make myself look more neutral. I was trying to find myself in my reflection.
Let me ask you this, how do you know that you don't have body dysmorphia? No matter what it is, it sounds horrible and it's heartbreaking. I mean that truly. However, it concerns me that someone would ever have the desire to make their bodies gender neutral. To me at least, I can't wrap my head around why. When I hear non-binary females describing their experience as running away from womanhood or making my body gender neutral, I don't hear signs of gender dysphoria, and I don't believe that non-binary is a thing because of that. I interpret the pain as something like body image issues or also internalized sexism and homophobia, and yes, that is actually a thing. I think just like gender dysphoria is a neurological condition, it's not controllable. I feel like only some non-binary individuals, they do have another disorder such as an eating disorder, body dysmorphia, or they suffer from a sexual trauma. There's nothing wrong with dealing with any of those things, and they deserve to get that form of help, because I, of all people, know what it's like to not feel comfortable with my body, with myself, and no matter what political environment you're in, you deserve to have the feeling of internal peace. I don't think, however, that identifying with made-up genders and being sucked in this whole universe that doesn't reflect reality would help anyone. My mental health started to improve when I started to acknowledge and started to live in reality. And I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. It's tough sometimes to face reality, but it's totally worth it, honestly. Because it helps me move on with my life without making me being trans my whole identity.
Honestly, it's one of the biggest signs that I should have known that I wasn't cis, because I would stand there and try to like flatten my chest, get rid of my hips, make myself look as neutral as possible because I didn't want to be perceived as a woman. I didn't want anyone to see me that way. I just wanted people to see me, and that was all. So that might be a sign that you are non-binary.
There it is. I didn't want to be perceived as a woman. Unless you have gender dysphoria, what's wrong with being perceived as a woman? And let me guess, it's uncomfortable to be perceived as a woman because you feel a lot of pressure to be a woman or to be feminine because I've heard that from a lot of detransitioners, female detransitioners. There is a hierarchy in the non-binary and trans community where if you're white, cis, and female or male, you're kind of at the bottom. So when someone is under that category, you can't blame them for feeling ashamed about their identity and wanting to change it.
The third sign is that you feel like your assigned gender at birth is playing dress up. I remember specifically when I was like 17 or 18, when prom season would show up, I would go into the mall and just dress up in prom dresses to like somehow feel like I connected to womanhood. And I was like, yeah, this is something women do. Sometimes it really would make me feel better, and I'd be like, oh, this feels right. And then other times it would just make me feel so bad about myself, because when I would look in the mirror and see a dress on me, I would be like, this feels like dress up. This feels incorrect. This doesn't feel right. Honestly, I feel like a lot of my teenagehood was that way. I don't think I was ever a super feminine person, but I definitely did play up femininity a whole lot more than I do now. And there are days when I don't mind dressing femininely, but it's more in a neutral person kind of way than someone trying to fit themselves into womanhood and failing miserably.
You literally just admitted that wearing a dress is a big part of womanhood. How progressive and woke. The way you express yourself in your gender, that's fluid. Gender itself, on the other hand, not fluid. If you think that not wanting to wear a dress, but only sometimes, is failing womanhood, you're implying that there's only one way to be a woman. And don't you guys find it weird to listen to someone that age talk about how if a woman is not feminine, she's not a woman anymore? You expect that from a, I don't know, Muslim guy in his 80s, but not a 20-year-old girl from the West. And how on earth can I be called close-minded for not wanting to create a gender for each time someone doesn't fit into gender stereotypes created in the 1920s? It's a crazy world we live in. Funny enough, I would never describe my experience as a trans guy as I failed womanhood. I never felt like I did a bad job or I failed at something. I just couldn't live the life that I was supposed to live. This makes it so clear to me, and I also guess you all, that what non-binary people claim to go through and what I as a transsexual go through, it's just not the same in any way. There could be many reasons why you're not comfortable with yourself. It's not a non-binary thing. It's a human feeling to have. We shouldn't stop working on ourselves and try to be better and try to look inwards, because what if you find the answers there?
The fourth sign that you might be non-binary is you just want to be seen as you. In the religion that I grew up in, gender is a really big thing. It's very much man is man, woman is woman. So when you're younger, they split you off into young men's or young women's. And I just remember being taught about all these woman roles that I would eventually have to go into, and how uncomfortable that made me whenever anyone was like, oh, you're turning into such a beautiful young woman, or blah, blah, blah. Or even if you asked me about myself, I would always just describe, when I grow up, I want to be me. That's all I would say. Like, I just want to be myself. I never really was like, oh yeah, I want to be a woman. That's something that I want to do. It just was something that I thought was innate, and that everyone was like, oh, I just want to be myself. I don't want to be seen as this feminine goddessy thing.
I get it. It's a natural reaction when you've had this experience. I just don't think it has anything to do with gender. The way that I analyze it is that you grew up with a lot of strict rules, and when you got older, you want to be a rebel and you wanted to break free. God knows I want to break free. Okay, sorry. She's describing gender as something that could be socialized, basically, and it's so ignorant. If gender or sexuality, or both, is a social construct, then conversion therapy would actually work. Sleep on that one. She keeps talking about being uncomfortable and not relating to ultra femininity, but that's just not the same as being uncomfortable with being a woman. And it really occurred to me that that's probably why we don't see non-binary people transition that much, because they can just fix whatever they're uncomfortable with by changing the way they look with a new hairstyle, getting some face piercings, or dyeing their hair. That's enough for them, or especially with clothes. So they don't need a gender transition because they're not uncomfortable with their bodies, with their birth sex, truly, in a gender dysphoric way. It's kind of interesting, actually. Oh, and by the way, the pronouns thing, it's definitely politically motivated and not anything else but that. So that explains it.
And the fifth and final sign that you might be non-binary is this video. Questioning whether or not you're non-binary is a really good sign that you might be non-binary.
I have reached 5,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate all of your comments. I love reading them. It feels like I'm actually interacting with people and not speaking to myself or to a camera. So keep it going, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.